Hi, in this video we are going to look at portal authentication using wireless access. This means that we have wireless devices which are connected to the network and they want to access the resources in the data center or go to the internet, and we want to have portal authentication enabled for those users. This is the typical scenario. For example, we have these wireless devices connected to two separate APs. One AP is providing connectivity for employees and the other one is providing connectivity for the guests. This is the employee VLAN 100, this is guest VLAN 101, and both these APs are providing connectivity to either the guest group or the employee groups, and they are going through this access infrastructure to the access controller, or they are being managed by the access controller, and access controller is acting as the point of authentication, and all the portal authentication services are going to be provided by the access controller in collaboration with the agile controller, which is sitting in the pre-authentication domain. If you look at the configuration steps, they are fairly similar to the wired portal authentication. You do the basic configuration, then you do the configuration on the access controller, and then you do the configuration on the agile controller. And let me warn you before we start looking at the configuration that because it is wireless configuration, this is slightly tricky and involves a number of steps. Some steps actually are related to the basic wireless connectivity as well as the basic wireless connectivity security. However, when combined with the portal authentication, the overall configuration tasks become quite lengthy. And as I always say, initially it might look difficult, but once you do it in the lab, you practice, you do hands-on practice, then things will become quite easy. This is the basic configuration which you need to do on the switches for providing connectivity, basic connectivity, VLANs and IP addresses, etc. This is the flowchart which you need to follow. As you can see, there are a number of configuration steps or configuration elements which you need to configure on the controller, access controller. And you can see that you start here. The first thing you need to configure is the radius template. Then you configure the portal server template. You might not understand exactly what this is, but we'll look at all these configuration steps in the next few slides. So first the radius template is configured, then the portal server template is configured, then we configure the portal access template or portal access profile, then we create an authentication free template, then we combine. By the way, when we configure the portal access template, we bind it to the portal server template configured previously, and once these three templates have been configured, then we combine all these three templates when we create the authentication template. That means we create an authentication template and then we bind all these three templates into the authentication template. After this, we create the security template and the SSID template, and then we combine all these three templates into what we call the WAP or virtual access point template, and in the final step we apply this WAP template onto the AP group which we already have created. Creating the AP group, etc., that is exactly not part of the portal authentication process. That's part of regular wireless LAN deployment. So now let's take a look at all these steps one by one, and then we'll move over to the configuration on the agile controller itself. This is the radius template configuration. I do not need to repeat all this, you already know these steps. Let's move on to the next slide. We create the URL template named Huawei. This is where we are actually configuring the URL for accessing the portal page. And here we configure the parameters. When the page is being requested, these parameters need to be sent to the agile controller or the portal server, and the portal server needs to check these parameters, and these parameters need to be same on both sides. And then the web authentication server listening port, which is 2000, this needs to be configured on the controller side, on the wireless access controller side. Now we start off with the next steps which I showed you on the previous slide on the flowchart. We need to configure the web authentication portal server, or what we call the portal server template. Here we are configuring the portal server template. Give the portal server IP address, the source IP address, and the port number of the portal server. Once this is done, then we configure the key. In the same configuration mode, we configure the shared key. We call the URL template which we configured in the previous step. You can also configure it directly, but just to keep it modular, we are importing it or we are binding it from the previous step. And then we do other timer related or minor configurations in the web server or portal server template. Once we've configured the portal server template, then we configure the portal access template or the portal access profile. We name it access portal employee, and then we configure another access profile for the guests. You can see we configure two portal access profiles, one for the employees and one for the guests. And here we are actually calling the portal server template web authentication or web auth server. Portal means for Huawei, and direct, this means this is connected through layer 2 connection. So this is the portal server template which we are binding to this portal access template or portal access profile. This is, yes, you can see in the previous slide as well, or you can see in the flowchart as well, that we need to bind or link the portal server template to the portal access template or the portal access profile. So we do this both for the employee portal access profile and for the guest portal access profile. After this, the next step is creating a free rule template. So we create the free rule template called default free rule, and in this we create these different free rules. The free rules, if you remember from one of the earlier modules and videos, the purpose of free rules, configuring free rules, is that these are the resources that we configure in the free rules. These are the resources which the users can access in the network even without or even before being authenticated. So these are the resources which reside in the pre-authentication domain, and these resources are accessible even without authentication. So we configure these resources in the free rule template by this name. Once we've done this, then we configure an access list 3001 and another access list 3002. These two access lists have been configured for, one is, as you learned later, one is configured for the employees and the other one is configured for the guests. The purpose of these two access lists is to allow access to the resources after the authentication or resources that are present in the post-authentication domain. That means the data center servers or the exchange server, mail server, ERP server, etc., and the access to the internet. In this, you can see that we allow the employees, because of this access list, you'll find this later, that because of this access list, we allow the employees to access all the resources. However, we are allowing the guests to not to be able to access this server, which is a service providing a service server in our infrastructure, and the guest can access the rest of the resources. That is probably the internet. Then what we configure is that then we configure the user group. We combine or we assign the access list 3001 to the user group called group 1 here, and we add the authentication event portal server down here. This configuration actually is required, might not be required in all the cases. This is required in the cases when the portal server goes down and the users cannot be authenticated using the portal server. In that case, in case the server goes down, portal server is down, the users are going to allow access to the resources that are configured in the access list 3001. So we, for both group 1 and group 2, this group 1 is for employees, group 2 is for the guests. We allow the employees and the guests to access the resources if the portal server is not available and they cannot be authenticated. So this is an optional configuration which we can do. Next, in the next step, we configure the 3 other profiles or templates which I mentioned in the flowchart or in the flow diagram earlier. Now we are going to configure the authentication template or the authentication profile. We configure 2 separate authentication profiles, one for the employees and the other one for the guests. By the way, just missed one thing here. Okay, probably the configuration doesn't show here, but we need to configure a MAC access profile as well if we want to do MAC-based authentication for the employees. Generally, it is required for the employees, which means that the employees do not have to enter username password every time they log into the network, every time they want to access the network. So we allow the users, employees only, to be authenticated using their MAC addresses. So we configure the authentication profile for the employees, in which we allow the MAC authentication also. However, apart from this, what we do is that we connect or we link the portal access profile to this authentication profile. As you can see, in the authentication profile, we call the portal access profile, then we call the authentication and the accounting schemes, which we configured earlier, then we call the radius server, which we configured earlier, and finally we call the free rule templates, which we configured in the last slide. So all of these templates are called in the authentication profile or in the authentication template, and then we do the same configuration or almost the same configuration for the guests. However, the guests are not allowed to be authenticated using the MAC addresses. The rest of the configuration is almost the same as for the employees, except that here we are calling the portal access template for the guest. Here we are calling the portal access template for the employees, and here we are calling the access template for the guests. The rest of the configuration is more or less the same. We enable DHCP snooping and enable the device sensor DHCP options. As you can see here, that this is done, or we do this to enable the terminal type awareness on the access controller and the agile controller, so that they can send the relevant portal or the relevant web page, push the relevant web page to the device based on the device type. Now we come to the kind of second part of the configuration, which is related to this configuration was related to the connectivity or the exchange of information between the wireless access controller and the agile controller and the portal server. Now we're going to look at the configuration which is responsible for the communication or the configuration between the wireless access controller and the wireless APs, or connecting the users to the access controller securely and enabling them to use portal authentication. First of all, now this is basic wireless configuration, which you should already be aware of if you are comfortable with the wireless technology. You configure the AP group. We configure two AP groups, one by the name of employee and the other by the name of guest, and then we associate the domain profiles, domain profile 1 to both of them with the country code China or whatever country code you want to use. So we associate the country code to the AP group. Then we configure the CAPWAP source or the communication between the APs and the access controller. The wireless interface 10 is going to be used as the interface for this communication. Then we associate the APs to these groups. So you can see that we are associating AP0 to the group employee, and we are associating AP1 to the group guest. This is basic wireless configuration. Even if you're not using portal authentication, you still need to do this configuration for allowing wireless access to the users using the access controller. Once this is done, then we move to the portal authentication related configuration. First we go to the wireless LAN view, WLAN view. There we configure the security template or the security profile by the name of security portal, for example. We don't change anything, we just use the default configuration in the security template. Once the security template or profile is configured, then we configure the SSID profile. One SSID profile is configured for the employees group, the other SSID profile is configured for the guest group, and we attach or we define the appropriate SSID. As you can see, the SSID should be the name of the SSID value should be self-explanatory. And finally, we configure the WAP profile, where we combine all the configuration that we have done in the previous slides. You configure a WAP profile for the employees, and you configure a WAP profile for the guest. You configure the forward mode as tunnel, you configure the service VLAN 100 here, and you're configuring the service VLAN 101 here. Then you call all the previous configuration that you've done in the last few slides. You call the security profile, you call the SSID profile, and you call the authentication profile. These three profiles or templates are called in the WAP profile. Similarly, you call the three relevant profile: security profile, SSID profile, and authentication profile. You call all these three profiles into the WAP profile. And in the last step, we are going to associate this or apply this WAP profile, these two WAP profiles, to the AP groups which we configured already. So we go to the AP group employee and we apply the WAP profile for employees to radio 0 on this AP and to radio 1 on this AP. Similarly, we go to the app group guest and we apply the guest WAP profile to both radio 0 and 1 on this AP group. So this is the configuration on the wireless access controller. Now let's take a look at the configuration on the Agile controller side. Once again, this configuration should be familiar to you. This is the radius related configuration, and this is the IP address of the access controller, and this is the portal authentication related configuration on the controller side. Then we add the employee and the guest SSIDs. These SSIDs should be the same as on the wireless access controller. Next, we define the data source, whether it is local data source or we are using an Active Directory server, which is going to be used for authentication. Then we configure the two access list, or use, not configure, in fact, we can say call or use the two access lists which have been defined on the controller in the authorization result template. Here you can see we are using this ACL 3001, this is for the employees, and 3002 is for the guests. And then we are going to apply these access lists in the authorization rules. 3001 ACL is used for the employees and 3002 is used for the guest group. This means that the employees and the guest groups are going to be, their traffic is going to be controlled according to these access lists in the pre-authentication or in the post-authentication domain, that is after the authentication has been done. Then there are a few minor configurations which you can do. You can use this wizard to configure or modify the portal page or the portal authentication page, which is going to be displayed to the user. If you want MAC address prioritized authentication for the employees, that is, the employees do not have to give their username password for authentication again and again. If they want to access the system repeatedly, they do not have to give the username password every time. Then you can configure the MAC address prioritized authentication. You have to enable it here. We've already done the configuration on the access controller side, and now we are doing the enabling it on the Agile controller. And you can verify your results simply by looking at the wireless access controller display access user. You'll know which users are online, and you can also look at the user presence or the users that have logged in on the Agile controller, both the guest users as well as the employee users. This was all about the configuration for portal authentication from wireless users. If you look at the troubleshooting steps, it's simple. It's similar to the troubleshooting steps we followed for other methods of authentication. The basic thing, once again, which you need to keep in mind while doing troubleshooting is that you need to make sure that the parameters are the same on both sides, that is on the wireless access controller or on the aggregation switch and the Agile controller. If the parameters are different, then obviously authentication will not happen. Then you also need to check the connectivity between the controller, two controllers, that is the access controller and the Agile controller, or between the Agile controller and the aggregation switch. And plus the other timers and other parameters need to be checked, and you need to follow the steps that were shown on the flow chart or on the flow diagram, that all of those steps have happened so that the authentication can happen smoothly. So this is all about portal authentication, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.